Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at an Echo CS310 chainsaw. The customer complaint is that he has a hard time starting it, and if he does get it started, it's low on power. Well, let's look inside the fuel tank and see what he's running in here. Well, it appears he's not running any fuel in here. That would make it hard to start for sure. I don't know why some people empty the tanks before they bring the equipment in. It may be because they don't want to transport it in their vehicle with fuel in it. But they're hiding a lot of clues from me when they do that. I would encourage anyone taking their saw in for repair to a shop to not mess with it before they take it in. We're looking at the fuel line here. We're pressure testing it. I wanted to put 10 pounds of pressure on it and see if it would hold, but it won't even build pressure. So we know that we have either a hole in the fuel line or a problem with the carburetor not being sealed up. We'll dig into this a little bit deeper. This air filter on the CS310, I'm not a huge fan. I know there's an engineer somewhere that's very proud of this design, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. Alright, so what we're looking for is where the main fuel line that comes out of the tank and runs to the carburetor, we're looking to find that. And it's right there on the side of the carb. And then I kind of realized, if this thing's got a scored cylinder, I'm not even going to move forward with this repair. So as I do with most repairs, I look in the cylinder and just make sure it's clean and shiny in there. And it is, so we can proceed. This saw doesn't look to be in too bad a shape. I can tell you that it's probably at least 8 years old. So he's taking care of it. So there we have the fuel line that runs between the top of the tank and the carburetor. Now the leak that we had could be in that fuel line, or it could be in the hose that's in the tank yet. So I'm going to put this piece of fuel line on the barbed fitting that's in the grommet that comes through the top of the tank. And I'm going to plug it up. Now when I pressurize the fuel line from the filter, I see that it holds pressure. That tells me that the line inside the tank is good. Now, I didn't have to move to this step next, checking the carburetor. I could have checked that short line that I pulled off of there. But I like looking in the carburetor, so that's what I'm going to do. Off comes the air filter base. We got to get the throttle linkage out of the way a little bit here. Kind of monkeying around. Let's get that linkage out of there. We're pulling it back out of the handle where the trigger pushes on the end of the linkage, and then just rolling it off to the side. Look at this. That gasket is actually, it's folded in half and blocking part of the opening going into the carburetor, which in itself would explain some low power issues. Get this carburetor off. This fuel line here is, let's think about this for a minute. It goes from the carburetor to the purge bulb. Now I'm going to pressure test the carburetor. And I didn't have to pull the carb off to do this. But you can see it holds pressure. This is the short line that I pulled off in the beginning, and that I should have pressure tested before taking the carb off. But you can see that it does not hold pressure. So this is our culprit. We know the line in the tank is good. We know the carburetor holds pressure. So on one end of this line, you're going to see that there's a little bit of a cut or a slit. That's right there. And that I damaged when I pried it off the carburetor. So I'm not too concerned about that. I knew pulling that thing apart, it was coming off hard, and I knew something was going to happen. But on the other end, that goes over to barbed fitting, there's actually a hole in the line. Right, it would have been right at the end of the barbed fitting. And that's where it was leaking when I pressure tested it, and that's where it would be sucking air instead of pulling fuel. So technically this repair could have been done just by replacing that short line. But when he's complaining about low power, I want to go in the carburetor and take a look. And I did. And there was nothing to see in there. I'm not going to bother showing you that part of the video. We don't need a 30-minute video just to look at a carburetor. Watch any of my other videos, you'll see something like that. So I've duplicated the length of the original hose, and then I'm expanding the end of the hose just to soften it up a little bit so I can push it over that barbed fitting. And it's going over hard. And I should say that this fuel line I'm putting on here is the actual Echo official fuel line. And I really hate pushing them on there like this. You take a chance on creating the exact same problem that we found. But I'm being careful. Sourced a new gasket. And we're just going to get things oriented a bit here. Get it put back together. I got the carb on the air filter base, and I'm going to push a screw through it, both the screws, and then try and get everything lined up. Just like that. So I kind of just temporarily put those screws in there. Make sure everything was lined up. Take another look at the gasket. And then we can run the screws home. And I kind of use the gun to take up the slack, and then the final torque is actually done manually. So that looks good. I'm going to put that fuel line that we replaced, I'm going to push it onto the carburetor. I did make it a little bit too long, so we're just shortening it up here. And this is another case where it pushes on really hard. I can't quite get my fat fingers in there decent, so we had to use the tool to push it on there. Now our throttle linkage just slips into the side of the linkage on the carburetor, and then we drop it down into the trigger mechanism. Some of you might be shouting at the computer right now, or your phone, or however you're watching these videos, because you realize that I may have goofed up here. Let me know down in the comments if you picked up on it. So I've got this special, what are these, forceps? With some shrink tubing on the end of them so that I don't have any sharp edges to cut the fuel line. That's what I was using on there. So now that it's all put together, let's see if it holds pressure. And it does. That's the results we want to see. We'll put our little fuel filter clamp on the hose. Then we'll push the filter on the end of the hose. Uh-oh, why? Why did I forget to put that choke lever on? No matter how much I fumble with this thing, it's not going on there like this. Yeah, I'm not happy about that. So we got to loosen a few things up. It's not that big a deal. It added a minute to the repair, whatever. Just kind of bothers me that I missed that. So we run our screws all back home, got our choke lever in place, do a function check. It's good to go. Get some fuel in here. And put our cap back on. This air filter, you kind of got to be careful, make sure you get it seated in there just right. It doesn't just drop in place by itself. You really got to manipulate it sometimes to get it in there decent. But I got it. So we're going to prime this thing up and see if it'll start. And if it does, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Echo CS310 that needed a new fuel line. Thanks for watching. Later.